I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday and we are continuing to plow through our divisional previews. We did the AFC and NFC North. Now it is time to turn to the West. We are going to start on the NFC side. But before we dive into that, 4th of July, Dennis and I managed to come back with all of our fingers and toes, no singe marks. The same cannot be said for all of the NFL players. The Los Angeles Chargers, one of the first teams that will open training camp. I think they actually open training camp tomorrow because they are playing in the Hall of Fame game, which I hate to break it to you, the last month without football in 2025 was June because the Hall of Fame game is actually on July 31st this year. But Najee Harris, apparently at a family 4th of July function where there was a fireworks malfunction that led to several injuries, has some kind of injury to his eye. They said it shouldn't impact him on the field. But Dennis, does it ever cease to surprise you that these multi-million-dollar athletes do some weird shenanigans?
These high quality, superb, just super duper efficient machines that have spent basically their whole lives being physically better at everything than just about everybody else. And then they go out and think they can, handle that stuff. No, it don't surprise me. But I mean, I'm at the age where I get taken out by a misplaced, my coffee table moves 6 inches and, I'm going to take it to the shin and be on the IR for, 7 to 10 days. Fireworks don't hold the same allure for me now that I don't take acid anymore. So and I don't do mushrooms. So there's just not that same appeal. They're fine, boom, yay, lights, whatever. I don't have an interest in shooting them off, but yeah, I get why some people do though. They're having fun. They're trying to be cool. You got to be careful with that stuff. It's all fun and games, so someone gets an eye poked out.
Yeah, I think my favorite part of 4th of July in recent years has been every year there's another interview with Jason Pierre-Paul. This year, yeah. It was something about the 7.5 fingers I have left. But at least it doesn't sound like Harris was setting them off. Obviously, some kind of malfunction. I feel the kind of same way. I like watching fireworks shows, all right. We can do the safe and sane ones in our neighborhood, although people do the giant, I feel the foundations of my house shaking ones for usually a solid week here. But just a good reminder, 4th of July safety. Another good reminder of holiday safety is don't drink and drive, kids. Demarcus Robinson was on the Rams, now on the 49ers, which means he factors in heavily today. Pled no contest to his DUI charge. Dennis, you think he will get some kind of personal conduct penalty?
He might get a game. He's not. I mean, I guess he's not as high profile, so he might actually get less because like nobody cares about him really. He's
Could be
Demarcus
important to the
Robinson.
49ers, though, because
He
Brandon
is.
Ayuk may not be available to start the season. It's interesting. The no contest means it settles the legal, but it's almost the same as pleading guilty, right? So
It's not an admission
basically,
of guilt. So I've read.
yeah,
Wink, wink. But it doesn't absolve you from guilt either.
yeah. I'll bet he gets at least a game. I mean, they take a lot of flack for being too easy on things, and honestly, I'm not saying people should go out and do marijuana, but drinking and driving strikes me as a much much more reckless behavior than
It
just
it
smoking a J. I
by
mean, we
by and large, now driving stoned is not without its own set of dangers. But
yeah.
driving,
Well, I'm not even talking about driving. They give suspensions still for people, even though marijuana is legal in at least half the states. They give suspensions for even usage. And I would think, if you're going to continue to uphold that like you're the federal drug standard, you should at least be recognizing that people committing criminal misconduct should get a suspension as well.
yeah, like I said, I expect him to get a game, maybe two, but I don't expect it to be like 6 games or 8 games. In part because he's not really a significant NFL player.
Well, no one got hurt. I think if you would have done that. But a good segue. He was on one NFC West team. Now he's on another. We are looking at the NFC West. We are once again going to take the teams in order of 2024 finish. First place was the Los Angeles Rams. They were only 10-7, but they won the tiebreaker to make the playoffs. Among their departures, Cooper Kupp left for Seattle. Demarcus Robinson left for the San Francisco 49ers. So 2 receivers leaving in division. Interesting. They lost defensive tackle Bobby Brown and linebacker Christian Roseboom. Among their additions, they brought in Devontae Adams at wide receiver. They brought in DJ Humphries at left tackle, David Quessenberry at right tackle, beefing up that line. And in the draft, they got running back Jarquez Hunter and tight end Terrence Ferguson. Fantasy finishes last year, Matthew Stafford was quarterback 19. Kyron Williams was running back 7. They also have Blake Corum, who was not much of a factor as a rookie. Devontae Adams with the Jets and Raiders was wide receiver 11. Puka Nacua, who missed a few games there in the middle of the season, finished as wide receiver 26. Tyler Higbee also missed some time coming back from that torn ACL suffered I believe it was in the playoff game the year prior, finished as tight end 65. Dennis, couple great receivers. Kyron Williams continues to be a beast in the backfield. They have some interesting depth. What are you expecting from the Rams in fantasy?
So I've been on the anti-Kyron Williams train for years because he's a 195-pound bell cow running back. And he's continued to basically prove me wrong since his rookie season ended. I think that from a redraft perspective, I think you still got to give him his due, but I don't know that Jarquez Hunter is the guy I would handcuff him with. I know that there was a lot of hope for Blake Corum last year. McVay's, he wants to use one running back most of the time, and should something happen to Kyron Williams, I expect Corum will get every opportunity to be the next man up. So maybe Hunter isn't really that guy. From a dynasty perspective, maybe you do add Jarquez Hunter because it's kind of, if you watch Sean McVay, he's grinding up running backs and spitting them out and just keeps feeding the pipeline. Corum's got an ADP, redraft ADP of 211. That's pretty deep. Hunter is going ahead of him at pick 192, and
Which
Kyron is at the end.
Can we talk about? I don't get that at all, because throughout
Right.
Sean McVay's tenure, no matter where you were drafted as a rookie, you don't really see the field. Kyron Williams didn't see the field as a rookie either.
He's got a hangnail. He's on IR for the year.
Blake Corum was a top of the third round pick. He has better draft capital than Jarquez Hunter had. And he saw 58 carries as a rookie, which honestly is more than what Kyron Williams saw as a rookie. We have been watching the Rams long enough that you should know that it doesn't matter where they took that rookie running back. You shouldn't be really interested in him until year 2.
Yeah, I mean, so Corum is going with pick 211, and this is Fantasy Pros PPR redraft ADP. And Kyron is going at pick 35, 36. So he's at the end of the third round. If I'm doing 0 RB, Blake Corum is a guy I'm targeting because he's going really late. And if something happens to Williams, just like you said, we've been watching what Sean McVay does. We should have every expectation that it's going to be Blake Corum up next and Ronnie Rivers backing him up, or who whatever other veteran they have. I don't think they have Rivers anymore. And maybe Jarquez Hunter pops off and earns an opportunity. But with his draft capital, it's not like we've seen guys drafted. What Hunter was a 6th-round pick, maybe?
They do still have Ronnie Rivers. So Blake Corum was a 3rd-round pick. So Kyron Williams was a 5th-round pick in 22. Corum was a 3rd-round pick in 24. Hunter was a 4th-round pick in 25.
So I think that grabbing Corum over Hunter, very smart. Whether you're handcuffing or whether you are playing the 0 RB game. I think they're going to ride Kyron Williams. He's shown the ability to withstand it so far. I would expect, though, that as a 200-pound running back, we're going to start to see the wear and tear add up on him. But with Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua, they may be more pass-heavy than they've been in recent years. So, Puka is going at pick 8. People love Puka, and he, to be fair, I feel like he's shown himself to be a guy that gets dinged up on the regular right now. Maybe not necessarily missing a lot of games, but playing seems to play an awful lot of games at less than 100%. But I think Puka is the rock star there. Devontae Adams is going to pick 29. From a dynasty perspective, I don't know. He's going at pick 100. So you get that gap. He's a 30-year-old wide receiver with a young stud wide receiver across from him. But I do think Devontae probably is the better value wide receiver between the two at pick 28. So if I can get him in the first half towards the middle of the third round, I think that's a great spot to target Devontae Adams. I think he's going to get a good amount of targets. I think Matthew Stafford is going to, continue to throw the ball a lot, and him and Puka, Adams and Puka will both be very, very productive. But at cost, I want Devontae Adams.
Yeah, and I think the Puka Nacua stats are a little deceptive because of how many games he missed on a points per game basis. He averaged 18.8 points per game, which was good enough to be wide receiver 3 behind Chris Godwin, who we forget had such a hot start, and Jamar Chase, who was number 1. But he was 0.1 points better on a per game basis than even Justin Jefferson, 0.2 points better on a points per game basis than Amon-Ra St. Brown. So he was putting in the work when he was on the field. He just unfortunately was limited to 11 games, which isn't the ideal for the Rams or for fantasy. hopefully they will be a good team together, the two of them. But I'm like you. I have Puka Nacua as higher and in the wide receiver 1 range. I think Devontae Adams can end up being in the wide receiver 2 range, though. I think the Rams are a team that throws enough, and they don't really have anyone necessarily else that is a big threat.
McVay's style is a very narrow funnel. He's done that. He's done that pretty much his whole coaching career. 1 running back, 2 wide receivers. That's where most of the volume is going to go.
Yeah. And, I don't see Jordan Whittington or Tutu Atwell really jumping up in there. Tight end's kind of a little bit more of a mystery. Higbee was tight end 65, only appeared in 3 games last year. So it's really hard to take anything too much away. I was trying to look at what Colby Parkinson was their tight end for most of the season, 49 targets, 30 receptions, not a huge part of what they do. So I think it's really, for me, especially in redraft, it would be Kyren, Puka Nacua, and Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I know in Dynasty, Ferguson is one of those darling tight end guys because he's landed in a spot where it seemingly – he's got a path to earn a job. Higbee's older. They're going to stash him. Ferguson's a really good athlete, was a good pass catcher in college. His dynasty ADP is 176, and Higbee isn't even being drafted in dynasty right now. He's just an afterthought, fill the roster. I need a tight end. Yep. Yes, he starts, but I'm not expecting much. Ferguson, he is a little bit interesting, but he's somebody from a redraft perspective that you'll probably be able to pick up on waivers. You shouldn't be drafting him.
Yeah, I would not take him in redraft. I think he's more of a taxi squad guy, even in Dynasty.
Yeah.
Next up was the Seattle Seahawks. They were second place in the division, also finished 10-7, narrowly missing the playoffs on percentage points. They cleaned house a little bit. They had an entire offense that was kind of looking at coming into a contract year situation. They moved on from a lot of them. Also moved on from their offensive coordinator, but quarterback Geno Smith, they traded him to the Raiders. Quarterback Sam Howell was traded to the Minnesota Vikings. DK Metcalf, wide receiver, was traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tyler Lockett left in free agency and signed with the Tennessee Titans. They let go of guard Laken Tomlinson, defensive end Draymond Jones, and cornerback Artie Burns. They brought in a whole new quarterback room. They signed Sam Darnold at quarterback, who had been with Minnesota last year. They brought in Drew Lock again, who had been with them for a while, was with the Giants last year, now back to be kind of a veteran presence, and they drafted Jalen Milroe. They brought in Cooper Kupp, the veteran wide receiver from the Los Angeles Rams, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, a Dennis Bennett personal favorite, who was with their new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, in New Orleans last year. They also drafted tight end Elijah Arroyo, an interesting pickup, and they signed defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence. Among the fantasy finishes, Sam Darnold was QB9, of course, for the 14-3 Vikings. Ken Walker was running back 27. Zach Charbonnet running back 25. Walker missing several games at the end of the season due to injury. Jackson Smith-Njigba, a huge breakout at wide receiver, finished as wide receiver 9 last year. Cooper Kupp was wide receiver 38, was limited to only 11 games last year with the Rams. Noah Fant, the veteran tight end coming into a contract year, was tight end 26 last year. You talked about Terrence Ferguson for the Rams, and I think he's kind of a practice squad guy. If you were looking for a rookie tight end that I don't think is an obvious start, but I like having more upside, for me, it would be Arroyo. I thought that was a very interesting pick. I also, we've had this discussion a couple of times. I still think Charbonnet was more efficient, had more yards and more receptions on fewer carries and fewer targets last year. I'm curious to see how that split ends up working out, especially with Walker going into a contract year and Kubiak coming off of a coaching tree that goes all the way back to Mike Shanahan, where running backs are kind of fungible tools. I'm wondering if we're going to see more of a split leading to a transition. But Jackson Smith and Jigba was great last year, and I hope that continues.
Yeah, JSN's got an ADP of 32, so you can get him in the second half of the third round there. I think he's going to be a volume hog. I know they've got Cooper Kupp there. Kupp just, he does what he does, but I think we've seen the injuries and age start to catch up with him, and I think he'll be productive, but it's going to be the Jackson Smith and Jigba show, and then MVS run and win sprints on the outside. Swapping when he gets tired. Torrey Horton will go out there and run win sprints. Jake Bobo will go out there, but he isn't running win sprints because he's just not fast. But I agree with you on Arroyo. He's got a ton of potential. Good athlete, but a long college injury history. Getting him, he's a good dynasty acquisition, I think. I think Noah Fant is going to be the guy solidly at the tight end position this year. We'll go round and round about Walker and Charbonnet. And Charbonnet may be the better long-term guy in this offense because of that Shanahan tree history of grinding them up and spitting them out, a la Sean McVay, and Walker going into his last year. So they could give him 250 carries, 270 carries this year, and he's, you give him 50 or 60 targets, he'll be really productive, but he's just as likely to strain an oblique walking from the sideline to the huddle. I love the explosiveness of Kenneth Walker. I think he is a better fit for the offense than Zach Charbonnet. And until he gets dinged up, I think he's going to get the lion's share of the volume. That being said, much like grabbing Blake Corum, if you're going 0 RB, Zach Charbonnet is a great target. If you're handcuffing, you want to go get Charbonnet because of Walker's injury history. I think we're going to see Sam Darnold for at least 2 years. I know they drafted Jalen Milroe. I feel like he needs to get some bench time in. He's not going to really play much this year, I don't think. And I think next year is when he kind of starts to get eased in a little bit to see what he can handle. So from a dynasty perspective, I like that. I actually just wrapped up one of my rookie drafts where the only picks I had were 302 and 410. Now I've got a great team. And I thought to myself, when we got to about pick 209 and Milroe was still on the board, I kept making the same offer to whoever was on the clock to try to go get Jalen Milroe. And then I went to bed with the trade out there at like the, 211 maybe. And I woke up the next morning and the person at the 301 had drafted Jalen Milroe. And so I was like, man, I wasn't even awake to make the offer to that person. What a bummer. Because my quarterbacks in that league are Jaden Daniels, Matthew Stafford, and Geno Smith. So I feel like I've got a stud and I've got 2 solid veterans. So I could afford to take Jalen Milroe and not have to play him until 2027. So for me, I was like, oh, this is a great – and my team is really good. I've got Bijan Robinson and gosh, I forget off the top of my head. The team, Brock Bowers. It's probably it's the, how you go and you tear down a team and you try to acquire a whole bunch of rookie picks so you can rebuild, and often some teams just end up keep moving it forward. So I have Jaden Daniels, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Nico Collins, Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley, Sam Laporta, Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, Matthew Stafford. On my bench, I got Geno, Javonte, Romeo Dobbs, Rashad Bateman, Darnell Mooney, Marvin Mims, Calvin Austin, Kayshon Boutte. So I felt like this team is I've got a strong starting lineup. If I can stay healthy, I can compete this year. I only have a second and a fourth round pick next year. So I was like, if I could get Milroe, in 27, if I can hold on to those picks, that was my strategy there. Didn't happen. Anyways, I think Darnold is going to be solid in Seattle for the next 2 years, unless he face plants, which isn't out of the realm of possibilities for Sam Darnold. But I think the combination of that running game and Jackson Smith and Jigba Cooper Kupp will give him opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, and Darnold probably is the biggest question about that team because, this time last year, we didn't know what to expect in Minnesota, and it was a magical season that had a little bit of a crummy ending. He wasn't great in that last regular season game against Detroit, and he wasn't that great in the playoff game, but, he was a very solid regular season, and I'm curious to see what he can do. We'll have to see. The third place team in that division was the Arizona Cardinals. They finished at 8-9, third place, missed the playoffs, but Kyler Murray was able to play their whole season and actually was pretty good for fantasy, finished as QB10. They had James Conner in the backfield, was running back 11. Trey Benson, the rookie, finished as running back 70. Marvin Harrison Jr., who was a highly interesting rookie wide receiver, finished as wide receiver 30. Michael Wilson, wide receiver 61. Trey McBride, an incredible breakout year, finished as tight end 2. They did not make a ton of changes. None of their main offensive people left the team. They did bring in Jacoby Brissett to be their new backup quarterback. They added Zay Jones to be kind of a slot receiver. They beefed up some of the defensive line with Josh Sweat, Calais Campbell, and Dalvin Tomlinson. Dennis, Kyler Murray has long been a guy people like in fantasy. We've continued to make jokes. He has never even hit 4,000 yards. He played and started in all 17 games last year and still did not hit 4,000 pass yards. He was at 3,851, 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He does give a little bit of rushing upside, 572 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns, which is why he's a quarterback one. I think my other big surprise, I thought by midseason we were going to start seeing Trey Benson kind of gaining steam, and it never really happened. James Conner, very healthy year, played 16 games. It was not a incredibly hot start, kind of an up and down season for Marvin Harrison, but I thought he was pretty solid. Trey McBride is pretty incredible. I think my question would be, outside of like the starting running back and probably in dynasty rostering Benson and having the number one receiver and number one tight end and Murray, would you take a chance on anyone in fantasy in Arizona?
I think if you're building out your bench and so let's say it's a redraft team, you're starting 11, you got 18 roster spots, maybe.
Well,
when you get out there to 16, 17, 18, Michael Wilson's worth a spot. He's a big receiver, good speed, had some injury issues in college, but I think he's shown himself to be productive when he's gotten an opportunity in his one season in the NFL, 2 seasons, and he's going off the board right now at pick 181, wide receiver 75. Unfortunately, the biggest issue with Michael Wilson is that Kyler Murray doesn't throw for a ton of yards, and he's got Marvin Harrison Jr., who had 885 yards, 62 receptions, and 8 touchdowns last year. And all we it seems like all we hear about is how bad a season Marvin Harrison had. And well, I think he was wide receiver 17, or no, that's what he's going off now. Where was he? Wide receiver 30. Yeah, you got it up there. Wide receiver 30.
Oh yeah,
I
wrote it down.
That's not great, but it's not awful for a while. It just didn't meet where we expected him to be a top 10 guy.
Harrison ended up averaging 11.6 points per game, which also isn't terrible, but it was a really boom or bust. Like week 1, 1.4 points. Week 2, 29 points. Week 7, 0 points. Week 9, 23.1 points. It's that I think was probably what frustrated people the most about Marvin Harrison Jr. and hopefully will balance out. Trey McBride seemed like, he was much more consistent. He probably could have had even bigger numbers if he had been able to get touchdowns before the end of the season.
Yeah, Harrison, was a roller coaster. I attribute some of that to how they tried to use him in the offense. There were several games where they're like, oh, man, we just need you to beat people deep. And that's just not what he excels at. He's fast enough, but he's kind of a DeAndre Hopkins guy when it comes to speed. He isn't, he's not a 4.3 guy. It's just not what he does. And because he came into college with such a high pedigree, and the college, high school was obviously easy for him. College was pretty easy for him. It's easy to fall into that trap that I'm just going to keep transitioning to the next level and it's going to be easy for me. And he admits, I wasn't strong enough to be consistent in the NFL when I got here last year. And it took me last year to realize, wow, I got to get stronger. And he went out this offseason and did it, at least by looks. He didn't go David Boston bulking up, but he certainly got himself a little bit more jacked. So we'll see how it goes. A lot of it's going to come down to, can Murray finally take that step and elevate the passing game?
Well, and Marvin Harrison Jr.'s rookie year was fairly on par with the kind of rookie year his dad had. So, yeah. But, it just, where you talk about Michael Wilson going wide receiver 75, that's probably not terrible value, but that's, if he was my wide receiver 6 or 7, I'd probably feel better than if he's my wide receiver 4 or 3, because I don't think Arizona, Michael Wilson had the exact same number of receptions as James Conner. That's kind of, there's Trey McBride, good. Marvin Harrison Jr., sometimes great, sometimes where the hell is he? And then everybody else kind of fighting for table scraps when you look at it. And I just don't think Kyler Murray is ever going to we started making it as a joke, but I honestly don't think he is ever going to get to 4,000 yards. He played all 17 games. He threw it 541 times. Those are all things you want to see. And we got 3,851 yards. I just don't think they're ever really going to have a robust passing game, in which case having 2 good fantasy receivers is about what you can hope for. They're an interesting team. I don't know how I feel about them. We'll get to
there's so many question marks. Like, we expected Trey Benson to step up and take on a bigger workload, but James Conner beasted out. But we also have seen James Conner get dinged up and lose productivity. With Benson now having a year under his belt, if Conner starts to flounder, are they going to be more trusting of Benson and give him more opportunities? Because, well, he's big, he's fast, he's healthy. Let's see what he can give us.
I think the most concerning thing for me in that situation was we figured Conner might get injured or start ceding time, which he looked good and he stayed healthy. Those are all. But he was in a contract year last year, and when they extended him midseason, that gave me a little bit of pause because, the thinking going in was Trey Benson was at least the running back in waiting and would be there to take off in year 2. And now we have the same kind of impediment, no real sign that he's guaranteed to get a bigger workload. And he didn't have a spectacular production when he did get it. James Conner averaged 4.6 yards per carry behind that line, going for 1,094 yards on 236 carries. 63 carries for Benson, only 291 yards. He did average at 4.6 yards per carry, but he didn't really distinguish himself, I guess, necessarily. So it'll be interesting to see. I still hold out hope because at least I hold out more hope for him than Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah. Well, here's where we're gonna play fun. Like, who's gonna be able to hit the 1 week Zay Jones matters? Who's gonna be able to hit the 1 week Greg Dortch matters?
Lord. Well, the last team in the division was the San Francisco 49ers, from first to worst. Injuries playing a big role in that 2024 finish. They were 6-11, fourth place. In the offseason, they let running back Elijah Mitchell leave. He went to the Kansas City Chiefs. They traded running back James Mason. He is now a Viking. They traded wide receiver Deebo Samuel, who is now a member of the Commanders. They lost a ton of players on defense: linebacker Dre Greenlaw and Leonard Floyd, the defensive tackle Javon Hargrave, and corner Charvarius Ward, along with safety Talanoa Hufanga. They brought in a few players. Mac Jones comes in to kind of be the backup quarterback and to maybe apprentice and rehab. I actually thought he looked really good when he had to step in Jacksonville last year, so I thought that was a quality addition. Demarcus Robinson comes over from the Rams at wide receiver. They brought in Michael Williams at edge, Trey Brown at corner, and Richie Grant at safety. And then they drafted Jordan James at running back to go along with Isaac Guerendo behind Christian McCaffrey. Fantasy finishes last year: Brock Purdy finished as quarterback 14. Christian McCaffrey missed a lot of time, finished as running back 69. Isaac Guerendo finishing as running back 48, got his chance to run out there. Ricky Pearsall, who rebounded from being shot preseason, to finish as wide receiver 82, a nice stretch at the end of the season. Juwan Jennings, most consistent, probably one of the most underrated receivers in the league, finishes wide receiver 24. Brandon Ayuk signed a big contract, blew out his knee early in the season, wide receiver 105. George Kittle, solid as always, tight end 3. Dennis, what are you expecting from the 49ers?
So with Ayuk likely missing time to start the season, or at the very least not being 100% to start the season, Deebo Samuel gone, Ricky Pearsall seems to have a muscle strain already. I feel like George Kittle is gonna hit the ground running early in the season and really look to set the tone for this team and establish kind of a physical receiving kind of dominant presence that they haven't always had. Sometimes they can be perceived as a finesse team, and George Kittle is going to bring that WWE mentality and kind of just start smashing mouths and put up. I would not be surprised if Kittle puts up the wide receiver 1 season this year, because I think once he gets rolling, even if Ayuk gets healthy and if they're winning games, I don't think they'd look to change what they're doing. If McCaffrey's healthy and that team is running well and they're rolling along and just smoking people with Kittle and McCaffrey, and then throwing in Juwan Jennings here, Pearsall a little bit, whatnot, Isaac Guerendo, and they just kind of are filling in with these other guys, and they narrow that funnel, because they do typically tend to they don't narrow it from a we always do X perspective, but it's McCaffrey, it's Kittle, and it's a wide receiver. And so if Pearsall's dinged up and Ayuk ain't back healthy, that leaves just Jennings. And then when they come back, I think they stick with Kittle and McCaffrey, and they just kind of keep filling in with the wide receiver of the week. Kittle's coming off at pick 40, tight end 3. It's crazy to say that, at tight end 3, he could be a value, but he could be the tight end 1. McCaffrey, we've seen it a couple times where he's put up super productive years and then missed a season and a half and then come back and put up super productive years. And lo and behold, here we are kind of in that same situation. And I know he's older. He's 29 now, going to be 30. He's an older back, but he's still
28.
He's still one of the best fantasy running backs to have ever played the game. And so
if just turned 29, so he won't turn 30 until next summer.
Okay. He could very well put up an top 3 RB season again. He's a 3-down back. Will they start to err on the side of caution with him though after, they look at his track record and they're like, well, we've seen Isaac Guerrero be productive. We have Jordan James, and we know James can be productive in this offense. So instead of giving McCaffrey 80% of the running back touches, we're going to drop it down to 70 to 75 and spread those touches out a little bit more. That's hard to say. I think McCaffrey is still, he's going at pick 8.5. That's pretty high. I don't in redraft, I'm all about it. Dynasty is going at pick 49, so the first pick of the 5th round. He's one of those players in Dynasty where when you decide how you're going to build your team, if you're drafting Christian McCaffrey, you're saying, I'm intending to win this league year 1, because I don't know that how many years of elite production he has left.
Yeah, I like Kittle. I like Juwan Jennings. Jennings had a very, very solid year. Only 10 starts, appeared in 15 games, saw 113 targets, 77 for 975 and 6 touchdowns. Pearsall will have to watch. I liked what we saw from him to end, toward the end of the season, but if he can't stay healthy, that's not great. I actually, health is the big question. George Kittle has missed time with injury. Christian McCaffrey, their wide receivers are banged up. If this team with the players they have is healthy and available, I think that they will be a good team again. It gives me a little more confidence that they must see Christian McCaffrey as back healthy and available after they traded Jordan Mason. Because I think if you thought there was a real chance you were losing him, I don't know that you let go of Mason and just fall back on Guerrero. Guerrero was okay when he started, but he wasn't incredible back there. And then behind him, you have another rookie who they didn't move in a running back rich draft class. They didn't move to take a running back very early either. Jordan James went off in the 5th round. So those things make me feel at least a little more confident that maybe Christian McCaffrey is doing well. So we shall see. Before we get out of here, this division, very interesting. The 49ers obviously won the division in 23. Last year, the Rams and the Seahawks both 10-7, but the Rams won on percentage points and got in. Arizona went from being pretty bad in 23 to 8-9, which is respectable. How are you feeling about this division?
I'm torn because I I kind of want to pick it on the narratives that I want to craft around each team. As in, Kyler Murray sucks, so I'm going to pick them last. Seattle, I want Sam Darnold to continue his redemption story, so I'm going to put them up. But, the Rams, Matthew Stafford got his Super Bowl. It's the Lions' time now. Are they going to be able to keep Stafford's back healthy? Are they going to be able to keep Kyron Williams healthy? Do I think the 49ers are going to be able to bounce back after, the changes they've made to their wide receiver core? Trent Williams is getting up there. He's pretty old, and he seems to be kind of moody out there at the left tackle position. And sometimes he just feels like I don't feel like playing today. I know he had some off-field opportunities and that stuff he had to attend to, but I think they're all going to be pretty good. I think even the last place team in this league probably has at least 7 wins. That being said, I think I'm going to pick it 49ers, Rams, Seahawks, Cards.
Yeah, that's kind of the order of finish I'm going with too, and I think 1 or 2 playoff teams. I don't think anyone in the West. I think once again, they didn't have anything more than a 10-win team in that division last year. I don't really think anyone's going to win more than 10 games this year. I think they're also going to beat up on each other and split with each other. I expect, to be kind of a close race down to the end, but I still like the 49ers. And I think that they can get back in. I think if they'd had a little bit better luck in a couple of those games and better injury luck, they would have made a run toward the top of the division last year. So, but I don't think anyone in there is so a couple of years ago, it felt like the 49ers were like one of the contenders, and I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like them and the Rams are competitive teams. They could, if they got in the playoffs, be frisky and could make the playoffs with strong veteran rosters, but I don't feel like either of them would be what I would consider the cream of the crop in the NFC. Arizona and Seattle feel like enigmas because of all the changes and because it's hard to get a feel. I'm with you. Like, I've never been on the Kyler Murray train. I will admit that he puts up decent fantasy numbers, but I don't feel like he necessarily elevates his team. Like, if you gave Matthew Stafford, Trey McBride, and Marvin Harrison,
he threw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns.
Would Arizona be an 11-win team, especially with how James Conner was running, and you're right, we've seen some potential from Michael Wilson. It's hard for me. The Rams were 10-7 last year, and they couldn't keep a wide receiver on the field. Matthew Stafford was out there winning with moxie and good duct tape, pretty much. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. That'll do it for us today. We will be back looking at a division that's near and dear to my heart, but also has taken years off my life, and that would be the AFC West. If you're looking for something football related that's fun, the second season of Quarterback on Netflix dropped, and Dennis, I'm going to give this one a strong recommendation for you because I thought I liked Jared Goff and Dan Campbell a lot before, but the quarterbacks they follow in this one are Kirk Cousins, which is just a fascinating train wreck to be watching play out in Atlanta last year, and then Goff and Joe Burrow. And Jared Goff and his wife and Dan Campbell gets plenty of screen time. Nothing short of delightful.
Nice.
I've watched 5 of the 7 episodes, so they're breezy, like 43-minute episodes. Last night when I was tired and missing football, I just put on a nice, 43-minute recap of some season highlights. I have not yet gotten to the sad game where Cincinnati's going to break my heart and beat Denver, but I'll let that go. Joe Burrow's pretty interesting interview. Kirk Cousins, learning a lot about him, like his affinity for great clips and singing Cher in the car while he goes through a fast food drive-through on the way home from a game. It's it's a fun behind the scenes football. You get to hear some of their calls in the huddle, which are fascinating as well.
Yeah.
So,
I've
but
actually seen Cher in concert.
yeah, it was a hilarious moment. It was Kirk Cousins and his brother and his two friends from high school, all singing the Cher song in the drive-through, and like his little son begging them to stop. But yeah, classic moments. So if you're looking for that, you can do that. Also, if you're out doing yard work, you're not near your TV, what can the people do?
You can grab their favorite little electronic device, pop in those earbuds, go to their favorite podcast platform, grab the search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a like, a subscribe, a listen. You tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends, and they'll tell two friends. Next thing you know, we'll be huge.
What I hear you saying is I've got to make another friend. I'll tell you about it. No, I'm going to make another friend. That'll do it for us today. We'll be back talking about the AFC West on Tuesday. Until then, have a wonderful weekend.